Hello, and welcome to the Thriving Kids Podcast, a brand new show from the Child Mind Institute. I'm Dr. Dave Anderson, Senior Clinical Psychologist and Vice President of Public Engagement and Education, and your regular host. Each week, I'll be talking to a mental health or parenting expert about how we can help kids thrive. This week, I'm joined by an expert in behavioral parent coaching and training, Dr. Caroline Mendel, who is a psychologist in our ADHD and Behavior Disorders Center and also the Senior Director of Clinical Services for our school and community programs, where she leads a team providing mental health care in high-need schools, working directly with students, educators, and administrators, and parents and caregivers. Welcome to the show, Dr. Mendel.
Thank you for having me.
There we go. Okay, so I'm delighted to have you for this first episode, which is all about something that is near and dear to both of our hearts, because it's a very major area of clinical focus for both of us, which is promoting good behavior in children. Okay, so let's jump right in. So Caroline, if we talk about where we should start, what do we think parents should start with if they want to improve a child's behavior across any age?
That's a good question. I would say relationship. It all is based on a solid relationship.
Yeah.
And I think you and I both will, whether it's working with a toddler or the teenager, will help parents build that relationship or rebuild that relationship because they're often coming to us when things are feeling more stressful and strained.
Well, I think this is also a really hard part of the beginning of promoting positive behavior is just that what do we think most parents are thinking when they come and present into our office with some challenging behaviors? I usually think of it as like someone comes in and really what they want is a quick session where I tell them what consequence or punishment will make it so that something never happens again and they don't have to deal with it. And then we kind of do this pivot that lots of psychologists do or any mental health professional, where our focus is, look, let us start not with the thing you want us to tell you, but some of the other things you need to build as a foundation.
Right. You catch more flies with honey than vinegar. So
That's a
we don't go in right with the consequences and punishments. Every parent will say, what do I do when my kid is tantruming? What do I do when they're, hurting me or their sibling? And yeah, if we start there, we're always going to be working at a deficit.
And I think this is the hardest part is that a lot of times what will happen is we'll listen to what a parent is dealing with. And importantly, this isn't necessarily a parent who has significant behavioral issues with their kid. It's a parent who has any behavioral issue whatsoever. And then we'll start off with talking about what quality time with their child looks like. So what do you think quality time looks like?
So I think parents often think that this needs to be, I've set a whole day aside. I have, I've cleared my schedule, but it really can be as simple as 5 minutes, especially for little kids, maybe more like 10 to 15 if you have a teenager.
Yeah.
And you want to give that child a chance to be in charge and choose the thing that they want to play with or talk about and give a lot of positive attention. Put your phone away. We all get distracted by our phone, but really give them that undivided attention. Avoiding lots of correction about their behavior, or criticizing their behavior, or even giving a lot of questions because that will put you in charge of the interaction. But just letting them be and you're following right along.
I think a lot of what I think about this is, with my own children who are 8 and 5 as of the recording of this particular podcast episode, it's just that I want to walk into the room. I want to not give them any directions as to what they need to do or, kind of tell them about what's coming up or something they have to prepare for. And I just want to look at the activity that they're doing, comment on whatever it is, and then highlight some things I can catch them being good about that activity, regardless of whether or not I'm interested in it or whether or not it's an activity that I'm immensely bored by, or we're drawing unicorns for the 75,000th time, or we're doing something out of Legos that's really tough. It's just trying to think through that.
Yeah. Just yesterday, I was with my 3-year-old. She loves puzzles. And I would say, you're putting that piece there. Great job finding that piece.
Yeah.
They're working really hard to figure that out because that's how she's going to naturally learn how to tolerate some of that frustration.
Right.
That may come with, not knowing how to do something challenging like to make puzzles.
And I think about this across age ranges because it's something where, when I was doing in-home sessions with kids at one point kind of earlier in my career, I remember that a lot of what I think about, especially for kids who are angry or thought I was like the 16th therapist to come in home to kind of work with them, the first 5 or 10 minutes would just be whatever they were doing, try to kind of follow their lead. And I still remember there was one kid who really liked to play Call of Duty, and he had not spoken to me for 3 sessions. And I just came in, I sat down next to him on the couch, and I know nothing about these video games because I've been terrible at them. Friends used to invite me over to sleepovers when I was a little kid just to beat me at Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, or Mario Kart. But so I just kind of sat down next to him and said stuff like, wow, you blew that thing up quickly. Or it seems like you've acquired an amazing weapon. or you completed that mission extremely well. And finally, he put the controller down after a few minutes and was like, what? What do you want to talk about? And it's like, at some level, it's building trust. It's helping them to think that you're not just there to manage them. It's, helping them to feel like there are aspects that aren't contingent on their behavior of your relationship.
Yeah. I think the other important piece, especially when we think about working with teenagers or preteens, is how you hold conversations with them. As parents, we often want to jump in and solve a problem, right? A kid comes home and they're like, "Oh, my math teacher is the worst," and you're like, "What did they do? Right?
Right.
What happened? What did you get? What grade did you get on your test? Did you study enough?" Right? You're sort of pelting them with questions.
Do you need me to write an email to the teacher, or should I
Yeah.
talk to the
Yeah,
principal?
well, you want to because
Yeah.
it's so hard to see your kid suffering or unhappy, right? So we want to kind of shut down their uncomfortable feeling makes us feel uncomfortable. And we often want to jump in and fix that uncomfortable feeling for them. But when you're kind of engaging in this either one-on-one time or even in just a conversation with your child, giving them that, being able to validate that feeling and show that that feeling makes a lot of sense in that situation and reflecting back what you hear them talking about helps to say, these uncomfortable feelings are not something that we need to get rid of or that are bad. And it opens up the door, like you were saying with your Call of Duty friend,
Yeah.
to have more of an open conversation.
I have this idea that he's going to listen to the podcast at some point to be like, that was me. I was the kid playing Call of Duty. But yes. But so, for those of you who are listening, we want to paint you a word picture because Caroline and I do a lot of talks for the Child Mind Institute about behavior to parent and educator audiences. You have been at the heart of creating a visual pyramid that we've used in talks for around 6 or 7 years. And while we don't have visual pyramid as a visual aid on a podcast, can we paint a word picture of what that pyramid looks like when we're talking about behavior?
Sure. So the whole premise is that you want to start proactively before you're more reactive. And at the very base of the pyramid, what we want that foundation to be is setting the stage for success, thinking about how we can prevent the escalation of behavior in the first place. Then we have positive attending and active ignoring. So using your attention like it's sunshine and fertilizer, and that is going to grow the behaviors that we want to see. We want to put that sunshine and fertilizer onto the flowers, not onto the weeds in our garden of behavior.
For those of you listening, Caroline is wearing a green dress that looks like spring and the growing of a garden. So this is a perfect metaphor. Yeah.
And that's where the one-on-one time comes in too, because you're, giving a lot of positive attention and building that relationship, and not giving too much attention to behaviors that are more annoying, not any behaviors that are dangerous or destructive, but ones that might, be whining or, trying to get your attention, right? Because you don't want to feed that behavior with your attention. Then we will teach parents how to give effective commands. So things like one at a time and in bite-sized pieces. Because if you say, go clean your room, man, that feels like Mount Everest to most kids. And they don't know what you mean by that, or they feel like they can't achieve that one particular command. And then we have behavior plans. Those are things like reward systems, giving privileges or other rewards for behaviors that we want to see. And then finally, after you do all of those things, then you get to consequences. And depending on the age of the child, we'll teach different effective consequences like timeout for younger kids or grounding or loss of privilege for older kids.
So let's do a 2-minute drill on 2 behaviors. You'll do one and I'll do one, and we'll show the pyramid applied to it. All right, there we go. So let's go hitting your sibling. How do you apply the full pyramid to hitting your sibling?
All right. So first, I'd want to know, what are the situations when that happens, right? Are there certain situations where that's more likely to happen? Let's say they continually fight over one particular toy. Maybe preventatively, you could get 2 of that toy and, have them each have the opportunity to play with those, or make sure that there's adult supervision at that time when they're playing with that toy. That's
So we set the environment up for
success.
Right.
And I also would set expectations, right? So right before they're about to play, I would say, remember, it's important to keep a calm, safe body. Use your words if you want the toy. So that is stating the expectations positively, what you want to see rather than what you don't want to see.
Yep.
Then our instinct as parents, things are going well. We're going to go do something we need to do, right? Like,
Yeah.
I always have a dishwasher full of clean dishes that needs to be emptied, right? It's constantly there. So if my kids are playing well, I'm going to go do that, right? But you want to hang out, see them playing well together and say, great job playing calmly with that toy. I really like how you're sharing that toy. Nice job using your words when so and so when you wanted that toy.
Yeah.
That's the positive attending. Then if with the giving an effective direction, let's say one of the siblings is starting to fight over the toy, you could give a command, please ask for the toy nicely.
Right.
So you're giving this nice command as like a simple, positively phrased direct command to give them the toy, and then saying, nice job listening, good job doing that. And then we probably could skip in that particular situation, if you're going to do the behavior plans, if all that stuff isn't working,
Right.
you might do a reward system for that. So let's say each play session that they are able to have a calm, safe body. So the absence of aggression, they could get a sticker or a check.
Right.
And then that leads to some sort of privilege or some word that they like. And then consequence, let's say they do hit. That's not, we want to draw a line and say hitting is not acceptable in our house, and you get a timeout.
Right. And with all of this, so parent listens to you give that whole pyramid about how to create this safe
I
space.
wouldn't give that final.
No.
This
You'll see
speed round.
speed rush.
Never ask a parent to do all that in one session, but yes.
So that's exactly it. It's like what we expect is the time scale for the pyramid you just gave. Like we're giving that quick hit to the listener here. But
Yeah.
how long would it take to implement a system like that? How quickly could a parent anticipate change? Like, let's manage expectations here and not seem like if they just go up to siblings this afternoon, suddenly no one will hit ever again in their house.
Right. So I think the most important thing is to be consistent. So to know whatever you're able to do not start to implement something unless you're ready to be consistent every time, and unless everyone in the house is ready to be consistent.
Right.
But if everyone's ready to roll with it, I would say doing like a week of the setting the stage for success and giving praise for those behaviors.
Right.
And then the next phase would be putting a behavior plan in place. You might need to tweak it a little bit if the rewards aren't motivating, or if you need a shorter window between when they actually achieve the behavior and when they get the reward. Sometimes kids, you realize, wait, they can't wait this long, or I've set the bar too high.
We do a whole separate podcast on reward plans, salience, the kind of
Yeah.
immediacy of the reward, the token economy building, all that kind of
And this is parents often come to me and they say, oh, I've tried rewards and they don't work. And it's because there is that tweaking. It sounds so simple, but we do need to make sure that we set it up really appropriately. And then to let's say implement timeout for aggression, another few weeks to really, be consistent with that, and, have the kids start learning, oh, my parent actually means it when they say I'm going to get a timeout for this behavior, because that's another thing we often have to undo.
I think we're illustrating here is that, so much of behavior is about the fact that it's happened hundreds or thousands of times. And it's that we still have to actually apply these skills over the course of a number of trials to get these patterns to change, as opposed to just thinking there's a one-stop magic bullet solution that we could do. And all of a sudden, the siblings play nicely forever and never hit each other again.
I know. I always say, I would have no job if it were that easy. So we wouldn't have very much that we would be supporting parents with if they could just turn around and, implement something overnight. And
Completely. And I think the other thing too is that commonly, what's thought about with these, behavioral changes is it is so much parental effort. We want to honor that. Just that notion. And for both of us, I think with our own kids, when I know that I want to facilitate a new behavior between my two children, I know that it involves exactly what you highlighted, which is I cannot orbit away just because people are playing nicely and either check my phone or unload the dishwasher. I need to be there to kind of mediate, set expectations, catch them being good, do those things, be ready to impose a consequence immediately. And that's a lot to put on any parent. So this is often why we'll also say, is this the behavior that is most important to you right now? Because you can't change every behavior all at once. You just don't have that energy.
Right.
It's just applying these kind of techniques to it.
Right. And even for me, I can textbook know what I'm supposed to do, but as a parent, trust me, I make blunders all the time, right? I know that I'm supposed to use a calm tone of voice and speak in a certain way and, give my full attention, and we're all human. So, we don't always hit the mark with everything.
What I go back to is, I have the privilege of being married to a psychologist. You're married to another person who works with children, which is
Education.
Exactly. So I always think of it our instincts are still the same. My first try is generally not with the consideration of my clinical expertise. I think it's just that my general line is just we're better on the rebound. We can sit there, take stock, be like, what would we say in a podcast to ourselves? And then we go back and apply that with our own children. So they get the benefit of like, the Dikembe Mutombo or Dennis Rodman of rebounds, and that kind of stuff. For those of you who are basketball fans. Okay, so do we want to do one more quick hit?
Sure.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay. Teenage one.
Yeah.
You said, yeah.
I
Okay.
think we'll go up.
So your parent comes to you concerned that their teenager is addicted to their phone, never puts it down.
Whew. Well, you brought in one that involves not just behavior, but also technology, which is one of the biggest areas I think that we get from parents of adolescents around, behavior in general. So if we just take it kind of behaviorally around the phone, what we're commonly doing with parents first and foremost is we're saying like, first, going back to your relationship point, let's not completely invalidate the teenager's world. Like we want to understand what they're doing on the phone, what they're doing online, how they're spending their time, not just act like the phone is a waste of time or that it's rotting their brain or in some way, causing them great harm. So the first thing is kind of getting to know what they're doing on it, what's important to them. And that can come from just applying some of the skills we were talking about earlier with Legos or Call of Duty or whatever else it might be, where we're just commenting on it. We're saying, oh, thank you for teaching me about this. It's so interesting to learn about this world. I can see why it matters to you or why it's a big deal. The next thing, and I think this gets like, we bring this in a lot more with teenagers where we're trying to start off and we set expectations with a little bit more of a collaborative problem solving process where we're going to say to a teenager, look, here's what I think is reasonable for time on your phone, for the time when I think it needs to be shut down, for the time when I think it might impede sleep or it might impede homework or it might take away from certain things we might be doing as a family. I can do these same things. I'm going to try to model them. What do you think about this? And some teens will come to that process and be reasonable and come back with reasonable solutions. Some teens will not. And so if we can get a teen to agree to a certain thing that a parent can stomach, maybe it's not the best, and we kind of try that out as a plan, that's at least a great way of setting expectations. Sometimes it doesn't happen.
I always find, though, that teens are more willing to be a part of the process than we think. The parents will say, oh, this is never going to go well. And even if it's not perfection, they give you a little bit more, I think, than you're expecting.
Totally. I always tell teens, like, your best bet is not to have your parent come to you a draconian solution for taking away your phone. It's about you being proactive, thinking about what do you think is reasonable. You propose that as like a first negotiation. And often a parent doesn't want any more trouble about this. Like they would rather not have the hassle of getting into a fight with you. So they might be inclined to actually come and meet you halfway and see what you're doing instead of like waiting for them and then just screaming no at whatever they say. So we get to the expectation piece. Then we talk about how to set the boundaries. If a parent feels like it's going to be really difficult or it's going to lead to a lot of conflict, we might talk about certain services that help us to kind of set screen time limits or limit app, access at certain times. But most of the time, we're trying to get the teen to actually opt into that, to realize that's reasonable. Be like, look, there is a reason why we put screen time limits on YouTube between the hours of 3 and 5 p.m. because we absolutely know that it is so hard to do your homework if YouTube is right there. Like that is tough. Or we will say, like, we know that going to sleep, it's hard for you to turn it off if some of your friends stay up till 1 a.m. So like, just for you to get good sleep, like it might be good to either park your phone outside the bedroom or, have your parents set a limit on the things that allow you to, talk to your friends so that you really are, as you say, listening to a mindfulness thing or doing a body scan or listening to a book on tape, which a lot of teens are using to get to sleep. I think then going to the stages that you were talking about earlier, is that once we, put this plan in place, we're trying to catch a teen being good, trying to catch them when they're actually adhering to the policy. We're trying to ignore minor acts of rebellion that we know are going to come from teens who are trying to be independent. And in the event that we see a real lack of respect for the policy or, trying to get around it or, breaking the rules, we might talk about short-term consequences. With teens, a lot of the consequences are around their social life, around their access to devices, around their access to any funds for their social life if they don't have a job outside school or some way of earning their own money, and then their curfew. And so we'll say to parents, those are your levers. Like it's different than timeout with younger kids, but let's think about what might be reasonable, short-term, can let them know that they've crossed a boundary, but at the same time isn't like you're grounded for the rest of your natural born life, like that kind of thing. So I love these quick hits. So now that we're talking about in a positive way, some of the ways, and I want to emphasize again that like everything we've just talked about does not require anyone to have clinically severe symptoms. These are behavioral strategies that can work across every single kid.
I'm sure every kid who has a device has, parents struggle with controlling that device. So,
Completely. And then we will have a whole other podcast on healthy technology use and kids and all that kind of stuff. We're previewing these. Also, our sequel on token economies, which is going to be riveting. But so, just in terms of some of the things that we get from parents, I feel like we'll advance this idea about how to deal with behavior. And as we've already highlighted, it is a lot of effort. Like one of the major reasons why parents don't do behavioral parenting approaches is not because there's not evidence, great scientific outcomes behind it, great outcomes at, 2 to 4 months out of these kinds of approaches. It's that oftentimes the kid who's presenting in our office, we're a little bit angry and frustrated with that kid. And we don't know that we're ready to kind of take this kid first approach necessarily. And it can be a lot of work just to build that trust and do this kind of thing. What are some of the things you get from parents that you would call like myths or too easy solutions that you wish you could kind of like debunk a little bit?
Yeah. Well, I think I do often have to share with parents the evidence base behind working with parents for these approaches because they often think, well, he's clearly very angry. I want you to work with him and process that anger with him. And there may be space to have,
Absolutely.
but if the environment around the child isn't changing, then that we really need to work on that as well. So that's one thing. I also think that there's parents are getting a lot of information from social media and podcasts about different parenting strategies, and it's hard to know who to listen to. Right? There's just
Yes.
so much information out there, and I think if you take little bits and pieces here and there, you may not be kind of giving yourself a full effective dose of the intervention. And all of the strategies we just talked about really are balancing warmth and limit setting, establishing that relationship, giving a lot of positive attention for the behaviors we want to see, while also having routines and structure and limits and very clear parameters around what you expect from your kid.
Right.
And that is not something that you can easily just take from one snippet. And it does require us to kind of backtrack some of the things that parents have uh, learned on their own.
Yeah. And I think that, commonly when we get, folks in the office who will say like, there's got to be an easier way, or it's got to be shorter, or I shouldn't have to go this much effort to get my kid to stop hitting their brother, or to get my teenager to just give me the dang phone. I think my answer is like, these tools are true in almost any setting. Like we are making them applicable to kids or teenagers, but these are the same tools that we would counsel people in work situations to do if they're looking to change colleagues' behavior or an employee that they're supervising's behavior. These are the same tools also that we find reflected in couples therapy, where when we ask couples to look at behavior change, we don't say, look, just by you labeling every single time your spouse or your partner does something wrong, that's going to get them to change. The same strategies of hypercriticizing, thinking about consequences, wishing that yelling stopped, these types of things, they don't really work for any human. So we're still looking at like, we'll ask people like, how would it feel if somebody in your life did this in your workplace or in your relationship? And usually people will start seeing that there's something there. Now, in terms of approaches that we generally get, what I think, in terms of approaches that we generally get that I think are difficult, how do you handle the question of like, is timeout going to hurt my young child?
Yeah.
How do you go with that one?
Yeah. I'm really glad you asked that question. It's another one that we could probably spend a whole
Yes.
podcast on. I think that if this is why we start with the relationship building, right? That you do have a solid relationship with your child,
Yeah.
and it is timeout from reinforcement. It's a brief timeout from pure attention and from the reinforcing activity that they were engaging in, like play, and you go back immediately to giving them that high dose of attention, and you can actually see when I'm doing timeout with parents, you'll see that they spring right back to having that positive relationship with their parents.
Right.
And be giving a consequence is holding your child in a different way. Parents often feel like, oh, this is terrible, this is traumatic for them. Sure, they may be crying because they don't want to be in timeout. They'd rather be playing with their toys.
Absolutely.
But you're showing them this is what we expect of you, and these are the rules of the house, and kids do find that grounding.
Right.
And so it is okay. You're not damaging your child with timeout as long as it's done appropriately and
Absolutely.
in the effective way.
it is a way of showing love as a parent
Yeah.
and appropriately balancing what one might do. And to be clear, there's no scientific evidence that it causes significant psychological damage to a kid. And I shouldn't even say, I said it in a way that could cause people to question. There's no evidence it causes damage. Because I said significant damage, and I was like, no.
Yeah.
Like, we both are open to using timeout with our own young children. And really, I think a lot of parents will get these messages. And I'm always thinking about like kind of where it falls in the range of authoritarian, permissive, and middle authoritative parenting. Because frequently the questions I feel like we get are centered around, messages that parents get online or from books or from podcasts or from social media, where the focus is either on being hyper permissive with their kid, like only ever sitting with feelings and talking with things and validate the child's response, when in reality, like having a fourth chocolate bar or hitting your sister doesn't really require validation. These things are things to set perhaps boundaries around for the child's health or, socially acceptable behavior. And then beyond that, other approaches that'll say like your child needs incredibly strict boundaries or incredibly strict consequences that kind of de-emphasize the role of the relationship or the notion of, how much that warmth and positive regard really does help a child to develop in kind of a healthy way. So we're always searching for kind of that sweet spot between boundaries, which every kid needs, and holding and validating that kid and knowing that their world is valuable and knowing that you care about them, and then finding the parenting approaches that kind of represent the middle path. To kind of close us up on this, our first, thrilling podcast of the series, and with at least multiple sequels we've already outlined, what is your favorite thing to recommend as a parenting skill at the end of a particular session? Just to highlight something, like give people like something that they can have in their minds as they, walk out and are trying to manage their child's behavior.
Great question. The one-on-one time that we talked about in the beginning,
Yeah.
I would say that would be my go-to, because no matter who your child is,
Right,
forming a relationship with them and being able to spend 5 minutes of one-on-one time with them is going to do a lot.
So
What about you?
my favorite one exactly is more that it's a 1-2 punch. It's basically the notion that I'll say to a parent, you walk into a room, your kid is probably doing something you could give constructive feedback on. And before you give constructive feedback, say something they're doing well. Then give the constructive feedback. Like, oh, it seems like you're really working hard on a Lego structure. I'd love if you could take 2 steps back from your sister. Like that kind of thing. And it's just, we're trying to get that 1-2 in there. Or it seems like you were really focusing on homework earlier, especially I know it's hard not to have your phone there. I need you to give me the phone now. And there's just something for any human about hearing, I've done something well prior to that struggle.
Escalates the
Right.
situation.
I mean, it makes you feel less defensive.
Yeah.
So in terms of resources, from this podcast, we just want to say we will have, I think that Dr. Mendel and I have highlighted a number of different things, but we will have books that we will reference as resources from this, websites, articles on childmind.org. We will have a video that's referenced in our Positive Parenting Thriving Kids series on behavior, as well as contact information on our website, should any of our listeners be thinking they would like to do some consultations or some work in this particular area around their kids. Any other resources you can think of, we can promise folks, might be on our website around the podcast.
Sounds like a good list.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much to our guest, Dr. Caroline Mendel, for being here with us for this podcast. And please feel free to tune in, not next week, but the week after, because we're doing this every 2 weeks till the end of time here at the Child Mind Institute Podcast Lab. Thanks a lot. Welcome back, and thanks again to Dr. Mendel for joining me. For those of you who are watching the video version of this podcast, yes, I'm in a different outfit, I'm sitting in a different chair, and we're recording this part of the podcast in a different time. That's because we want to bring you some current events. Because before we wrap up, I want to tell you about a free resource we just released, our new College Readiness Guide. If you've got a teenager heading off to college, or even a teenager just thinking about when they might head out to college, our toolkit has you covered. It's designed to support mental health during the transition and covers things like daily routines and planning skills, because managing your own schedule for the first time in your life may be rough. We'll walk you through scenarios like, your child failed a midterm. How can you support them and what should they do? Or, your child is having a conflict with their roommate. What should they do? Really practical stuff that helps you stay connected while letting your college student build confidence. You can download it now at childmind.org, or we'll link it in the show notes. Thank you for joining us on the childmind.org Thriving Kids podcast, and we will see you next time.